Well, hello and good evening, and welcome to episode 35 of Fracking Nightmare. I think we're a little bit late going on air tonight, but we had an interesting experience during this evening's earlier edition of Humanity versus Insanity, the Crane Report, where I was giving my thoughts on Scottish independence, and I guess I must have said something that struck a chord because the live stream just went dead for about 5 minutes. Anyway, that will be edited out of the YouTube version, which will be up on my YouTube channel, Ian R. Crane, tomorrow morning, along with this episode of Fracking Nightmare. Now, before I get into tonight's edition, which is going to be a shorter edition than usual, primarily because I have to head back up the motorway and get myself back up to East Yorkshire, to the wonderful East Riding for an event tomorrow evening in the beautiful village of Newbold. But more about the East Riding a little bit later on. But before I get underway, it's been a couple of weeks since I was on air. Last week was bank holiday. And I know that everyone has probably spent all their money over the summer. But if I could just ask for those of you who are able to dig deep, to support the fracking awareness campaign. Unfortunately, the campaign is hotting up. We have an increasing number of fracking locations that are being spudded in the coming weeks and months. And I'm already clocking some 900 miles on average each week as I try to get around the various locations. And as you'll see, in the coming 10 days or so, I have a number of engagements. Now, most of these engagements are done on the basis of donation only. And just to give an example, I did one event last week, and the cost to me was in the region of about £130, and the donations came to just £30 after all other expenses were covered. So, unfortunately, this campaign does drain the proverbial financial accounts. So I really appreciate all the help that I've received to date. But I am intending to stay this course until we have shut down this industry in the UK. So any help that you're able to offer, please consider supporting the Fracking Awareness Campaign. And you can do that by going to www.frackingnightmare.com. And if you look on the top left-hand side, that page, there's a box there where you can make a donation. So thank you very much indeed. I know that many of you would be with us on the front lines at the various camps around the country. But, you know, normal life does get in the way. We completely understand that. And so, you know, please do help to support those of us that have committed ourselves to challenging this abomination on the front line. Now, today I am in Devon. I'm in the studio in Plymouth at the moment. And today I picked up the Western Morning News. Now, this is the paper that covers pretty much the west of England, from about Taunton in West Somerset right down through Cornwall. And this headline caught my eye. It was on the front page: "Surge of solar panels on farms must stop." I mean, you know, we have this absolute absurdity right now of the NIMBY community challenging wind farms and solar farms. Now, you know, I, for one, have absolutely no problem whatsoever with solar farms because I'm not actually tall enough to see over the hedges. So I don't really see them at all. And whilst the wind farms, I must confess, I am absolutely no lover of wind farms whatsoever. But given the choice between solar panels in a field and a row of windmills on a ridge and hydraulic fracturing, there's a no-brainer. At the end of the day, if we're talking about transition fuels, if we're talking about a form of energy generation that we need to embrace until such time as we find the appropriate technology to give us very ultimately clean energy, then to embrace solar farms and wind farms versus fracking is absolutely, you know, no contest. Here was the headline again. Solar farms are industrializing the countryside, campaigners warn. Well, what is very interesting is in the East Riding of Yorkshire, there were indeed groups that were campaigning against the wind farms. But now that they have become aware of the full potential impact of the hydraulic fracturing industry in the East Riding of Yorkshire, guess what? They've finally acknowledged that they are actually fighting the wrong battle. And they are now going to channel their energies not to challenging the rise of windmills in East Riding, but the threat of the spread of Rathlin energy and the hydraulic fracturing there. So I'm sure we're going to see this from time to time. Fortunately for the West Country, it's outside of the area that is being marketed by the British government. 46% of the country is up for grabs right now. 18% had already been licensed. And that 46%, the closing date for bids is, I believe it's October the 28th. And I, for one, hope that every single square metre that is up for grabs is acquired by the unconventional gas industry. Because at that point, we will literally have some 40 million people in this country who are potentially under threat from the hydraulic fracturing industry, the unconventional gas industry, and that will be a very, very serious opposition. So let's have a look at what's going on in the one area of the UK right now. And I am very pleased to report that the stock price of iGas is moving in the right direction. In fact, I'm, even though I don't drink alcohol, but I have a bottle of champagne ready to crack open the next time I visit Barton Moss, the moment that the iGas stock price drops under 100, which is effectively £1. So the iGas stock has had a very interesting ride over the last couple of years. The peaks there tend to coincide either with Andrew Austin, the chief executive of iGas, doing the rounds and blagging about how amazing the opportunity for investors is in the unconventional gas industry. And he's very convincing. He's very telegenic. You know, he comes across as a genuine, individual. But let me tell you, for the small investors who get into this industry, you're going to lose a lot more than your shirt. So, the big boys are going to be protected, and it's the small investors that are going to suffer. But perhaps one of the reasons that the iGas stock price is dipping is, of course, iGas, and Andrew Austin in particular, have ambition to become the major player in the unconventional gas industry in this country. And earlier this year, they announced that they had acquired Dart Energy. Dart Energy was on the brink of bankruptcy just last November when Total stepped into the breach. I mean, having effectively been banned from fracking in France by the French government. In fact, it was the highest constitutional court, the Conseil Constitutionnel, on October the 11th last year, who upheld the presidential ban that had originally been put in place by Sarkozy and then was continued by Francois Hollande. And then the courts upheld that ban. So hydraulic fracturing in France is an absolute no-go. So Total then turned their attention to the UK and pumped some £40 million into Dart Energy. And iGas made a bid for Dart Energy. Well, funnily enough, the British government and particularly the Competition and Markets Authority have decided that this is a potential merger that might impact on competition. And whilst ultimately, of course, the globalist agenda is to establish absolute monopoly, there are some stages of the game, as it were. And so at this particular juncture, the Competition and Markets Authority have put that merger on hold pending an inquiry. So in fact, there are just 3 days left for to get in your objections regarding any impact on competition that this merger may have. So, at this particular juncture, I would encourage all other unconventional gas companies. So, Francis Egan, if you or any of your staff are watching, then my recommendation would be that you start to draft your letters of objection. So here we have on screen now, phase 1, the invitation to comment, closing the 5th of September. The Competitions and Merger Authority is considering whether it is or may be the case that this transaction has resulted in the creation of a relevant merger situation under the merger provisions of the Enterprise Act 2002. And if so, whether the creation, that situation has resulted or may be expected to result in a substantial lessening of competition within any market or markets in the United Kingdom for goods and services. And there's the address on screen for representations about any competition issues to Tom Cole, Competition and Markets Authority, Victoria House, Southampton Row, London, WC1B 4AD. So, Celtic, Rathlin, Viking, Third Energy, UK Methane, Coastal Oil and Gas, and of course Quadrilla, you need to be getting your letters of objection in there, because believe me, if iGas are successful in acquiring Dart Energy, then you will ultimately be squeezed out of the game. And just to show you here, what we have on the map on screen here is all the areas in pink. All those areas here, this is the area right across the Manchester Ship Canal where iGas has a symbiotic relationship with Peel Holdings. All of these purple plots here, these are all the iGas licenses, and everything in yellow is Dart Energy. So you can see that certainly across the Northern Midlands and the north of England, a combined company of Dart and iGas, iGas as they are about to be called, would be very significant. And in the south, not quite so much, just one Dart Energy license right over here, just to the north of Swansea, but a number of iGas locations down here in Sussex and through Hampshire, and one up in Surrey. So as you can see, would be quite a megalithic company. Right, a live site, or a site that will be live very soon. Seems we've got a double exposure on the slide here, but this is iGas's new site at Ellesmere Port, which they have announced in the Cheshire media that they plan to start drilling later this year. Now, this is going to be a very real challenge for the local community because, unlike Barton Moss, which was a perfect location for the protection community to camp along Barton Moss Road, this particular site is on right at the very back, actually, of an industrial estate. And it's backed up by a railway line, and behind that is the Manchester Ship Canal. So it's going to require quite a bit of creativity, but at the end of the day, I'm sure the protection community is more than capable of rising to the occasion. So that's just a quick summary there of events in the UK at the moment. We'll come back to the UK in just a second, but I just want to go and take a look at the US of A, because some very interesting information has come out of the US in recent weeks. Now, what you've got to remember, of course, is that the US has often been touted by Michael Fallon. Whilst he was Energy Minister, of course, he's now become the country's Defence Minister. God help us. Well, Michael Fallon, of course, often trotted out the palliative that there has never been a reported case of groundwater contamination in the US of A. Well, just recently a report has emerged from Pennsylvania which has listed some 243 cases of groundwater contamination due to hydraulic fracturing. And then this report regarding waste and the massive misreporting of waste from hydraulic fracturing. Now, this is an order of magnitude that is almost unbelievable. So EQT Corporation told the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection that it had sent 21 tons of drill cuttings from its Marcellus shale wells to area landfills in 2013. Now, bear in mind that there's a very strong probability that the drill cuttings, certainly the deeper drill cuttings, were containing radioactive materials. But the landfills in southwestern Pennsylvania told a very different story. Can we just bring that back up on screen a second? 6 facilities in this part of the state reported receiving nearly 95,000 tons of drill cuttings and fracking fluid from the downtown-based oil and gas operator last year. The landfill records are the correct one, said Mike Forbeck, Waste Management Director of DEP. He said that the agency has opened an investigation into drillers' under-reporting of landfill waste. Now, let's just understand the magnitude of this. 21 tons versus 95,000 tons. So anybody who believes that this industry practices openness and transparency or has any basis of integrity whatsoever is unfortunately delusional. Another report that emerged in the recent days, scientists are shocked to discover the true toxicity of fracking fluids. It's worse than we've been told. The article reads, led by William Stringfellow, PhD, the study's results raised concerns about several ingredients used in the controversial drilling process. Stringfellow conducted the review in the hopes of solving public debate over the controversial drilling. It was confessed that very little is known about the potential health and environmental effects associated with the nearly 200 chemicals used to crack geological formations in the ground, releasing profitable natural oil and gas. Almost nothing is known about 1/3 of the compounds. 8 of them are toxic to mammals, according to Stringfellow. Well, in reality, of course, it's a lot worse than that. And in fact, I guess that Stringfellow hasn't stumbled across the work of Dr. Theo Colborn. But for those of you who are interested in looking at the phenomenal research of Dr. Theo Colborn into the chemicals that she has identified as being used in the process of hydraulic fracturing in the past 15 years, just go to frackingnightmare.com. And if you click on the download, there's only one download available on that website at the moment. And click on the download, and there is an Excel spreadsheet. And this Excel spreadsheet is effectively the life's work of Dr. Theo Colborn. And she's put it into the public domain to share this research. And she has identified some 960, I think it is, chemicals. And it's not just a list of chemicals, but she has identified what the industry uses them for, and also the harmful effects they have on human life, other life, or on any aspect of the environment. So that's the download on frackingnightmare.com. And please feel free to share this database, because this is the most comprehensive database that is available. And believe you me, the British government and the unconventional gas industry does not want you having this information at hand. Meanwhile, what does the industry say in response to Stringfellow's observations? Well, the industry claims and that they have insisted that fracking is completely safe despite a lack of research dedicated to long-term effects on people and the planet. The industrial side was saying, we're just using food additives, basically making ice cream here, says Stringfellow. Now, where have we heard that before? Francis Egan, Andrew Austin, and of course, Montague Smith of Rathlin claims they're not fracking at all. Meanwhile, we have the issue of water abstraction. In West Virginia, where it's similar volumes of water that are required for each frack job there, 4 to 9 million gallons of fresh water. That's actually US gallons, which is 4/5 of an imperial gallon. And residents of Doddridge County claim fracking operations have sucked creeks and rivers dry. Well, this is a phenomena that is very well known in the western states, where they don't benefit from a great river system such as the Mississippi, Missouri, Ohio rivers in the eastern states. And in the western states, the rivers are being drained at a phenomenal rate, as are the underground aquifers. And in fact, this was even identified by the BBC just today, actually. This is an article from today. Water stress may curtail fracking, says the World Resources Institute. And let's have a look at that article. It says, water shortages could hinder fracking for shale oil and gas in many parts of the world, the World Resources Institute has said. In the first report of its kind, the World Resources Institute found that 38% of the world's shale resources were in arid areas or in those with severe water stress. Accessing fresh water was likely to present serious challenges, it said. Until now, concerns about fracking and water have focused on contamination of local supplies. The process of fracking, or hydraulic fracturing, involves pumping water, sand and chemicals at high pressure in the shale rock formations to release oil and gas held within. It is highly water intensive. The World Resources Institute report raises questions about whether there are enough freshwater supplies to support fracking in some countries. Lack of water availability could curtail shale development in many places around the world. As countries explore their shale exploration, limited availability of fresh water could become a stumbling block. It's already a stumbling block. But does the government or does the industry care? Not at all. And that's why Nestle are in the process of buying up the world's fresh water resources. It's why there are an increasing number of articles in the economic press discussing water as a prime commodity. The global corporatists know that water is the new oil. And in fact, as people become aware that there is absolutely no shortage of hydrocarbons, but we just don't have a safe process by which to extract them, and more fresh water is used in this process, then of course water is going to be at a higher and higher price. In my opinion, Nestle should be boycotted, along with many other companies right now who are not practicing benign capitalism in any way, shape or form. This is corporatism at its most outrageous. And let's not forget that it was Peter Brabeck, the chief executive officer of Nestle, who in 2005 recorded an interview in which he stated that in his opinion, access to fresh water should not be regarded as a human right. Basically what he was saying was that unless you are making a direct contribution to the corporatist agenda, i.e. you're on the payroll, then you shouldn't have any access to fresh water, i.e. the basics of life, or indeed life itself. So if the potential for water shortages wasn't a big enough problem, the next problem, of course, is the earthquake activity. And increasingly in the United States, obviously California, sitting right on the San Andreas Fault, has a history of seismic activity. But that seismic activity is increasing at a phenomenal rate of knots. And then right across the southern part of the Midwest there, from Oklahoma through into Arkansas, we can see there a phenomenal increase in seismic activity. And this activity is almost all attributed directly to the process of disposing of used frac fluid down into disused wells. A process which, of course, is disposing of fluids which are still active. They're still doing what they're designed to do, which is to create artificial permeability and artificial porosity in geology. So now let's return to the UK and take a look at some of the things that are occurring in the UK. And this was an article that appeared actually, I think, in the Sunday Times just over a week ago, and then was effectively copied by many of the tabloids the following day. And this is a report from the Fylde Peninsula, from the Blackpool area. And this is an observation that I have been making for some time. And in fact, in the Fractured Future presentations that I was delivering in the first half of last year. And in fact, the Fractured Future presentation I delivered in Barnsley in South Yorkshire is up on YouTube. And that was recorded, I think, in early June or late May of last year. And in that presentation, I made the observation about the Blackpool property market, stating that effectively the market had completely tanked. And I quoted the example of a good friend of mine who, after the second earthquake on May 27th last year, which was attributed to Quadrilla, he and his wife decided that they were going to initiate their retirement plan and move to Spain, which they did, and then put their house on the market. Their house, a beautiful 5-bedroom house, was valued at $325,000, but they decided that they wanted to get rid of it fairly quickly, so they dropped the price to $299,000. Well, here we are, nearly exactly 3 years later, and they haven't had a single offer on that property, having had to resort to just letting it out and pretty much taking whatever they can get for it. Well, I was accused of scaremongering. And even one or two estate agents said, no, that's not true. But in reality, it is. And estate agents are leaving the Blackpool area in their droves. There is no market. And as this article in the Sunday Times showed, this lady here, we can see on the screen, house was valued initially, pre-Quadrilla, at £720,000. And it's now been valued at just £180,000. And in fact, in reality, what the estate agents were saying is the reality is your house isn't going to sell. It doesn't matter. You know, we're just going to put a nominal value on it, but it's not going to sell. The only way you're going to get rid of it is effectively by dumping it. In other words, just taking probably maybe $100,000 if you're lucky from a developer who's going to gamble. Well, all I can say to the people on the Fylde Peninsula is it is in your financial interests, and of course it's also in the interests of your health and well-being of you and your family to get involved in the anti-fracking campaign. Quadrilla is extremely active in the Fylde Peninsula. If you go to the Quadrilla website, they actually talk about their ultimate objective of having something in the region of 120 well sites in the Fylde Peninsula. Not necessarily in the next year or two, but in the lifetime of the shale gas industry, which is certainly going to be probably 30 to 50 years, as I'll show you in a second. Well, Quadrilla are trying to drill 2 wells. They're trying to get started in Preston New Road and at Rossiter. And a couple of weeks ago, the field adjacent to the Quadrilla site in Preston New Road was occupied by the Reclaim the Power camp. Well, that camp vacated that site last Wednesday, but nonetheless, Quadrilla supported the local farmers in trying to get an injunction against any future occupation. And that case was heard initially in Manchester Civic Courts last Thursday. But what was absolutely unique about Quadrilla's submission was that they were trying to get an injunction pretty much against the whole world and their dog. What they were seeking was literally to get an injunction against any anti-fracking group and anybody that has had any association with them at any time. I mean, this is basically an attempt to completely censure the world from opposing the hydraulic fracturing industry. Fortunately, the judge, although barely managing to conceal his contempt, reminded Quadrilla that there was such a thing as the human rights legislation, which did indeed give people the right to assembly and the right to peaceful protest. However, the case is not over, and the judge did agree that the defendants needed more time to put their defence together, and so that case is now going to be heard later in October. So go to the Fracking Nightmare Facebook page, and you'll get your updates from that. Now, actually, there was another court hearing in Manchester today, and this related to the people that were arrested on the first day that iGas tried to get their convoys up Barton Moss Lane after Barton Moss Road had been declared a footpath. And I'm pleased to report that all charges were dropped. Everyone was found not guilty. So yet again, more unlawful arrests, more arrests that were purely conducted for intimidatory purposes against the protection community. So congratulations to everybody in court today, and hopefully that it will continue in that vein in the coming weeks. I have no idea what the latest numbers are, but the number of actual convictions, I think, is still in single figures. And this is, of course, completely absurd, and it just goes to prove that the police forces at Boreham and Greater Manchester Police throughout the Barton Moss campaign were effectively acting as corporate enforcers. Well, I did say it was going to be a relatively short programme tonight, and as I said, I do have to head back up the motorway to get back to the East Riding of Yorkshire. So a village event in the village of North Newbold tomorrow evening. And then I believe that we're also going to be hosting an event in the village of Cherry Burton next Thursday. Now, that should be a very interesting event because the village of Cherry Burton is also the home to the farmer, a certain Mr. Ellerington, who owns the Crawberry Hill site. And, of course, the recent eviction of Crawberry Hill Castle demonstrated that both Rathlin and the farmer have really no intention of this just being a short exploration venture, because what the court papers revealed is that Rathlin have a 50-year option on the land at Crawberry Hill and also at West Newton. So now that this has come to light, and now that a few of the Bishop Burton residents are beginning to realise that they have effectively been hoodwinked and indeed bullied by Mr. Errington, who we understand his wife sits on the local parish council. Now, this does seem to be a common denominator where the local councillors do seem to be getting some kind of benefit by being in some way involved with this industry. We've seen the same thing in the Fylde Peninsula, where a number of councillors effectively took money for allowing their land to be used for the seismic surveys. And they do this without turning a hair. Once upon a time, this would have been regarded as corruption, but now it's considered to be the normal behaviour. So here's the event I have in Beverley. Now, this is a very, very important event because this event next Wednesday, sorry, not this coming Wednesday, Wednesday week, Wednesday the 10th of September, is actually the day before the closing date for objections to Rathlin's application for a further 2 years planning permission at Crawberry Hill. So the initial planning permission was just for 2 years. That planning permission expires on November 5th. Rathlin have stated that the reason that they can't complete by November 5th is due to the protectors building the castle and blocking the entrance for 7 weeks. That doesn't account for why it was that Rathlin weren't there for the previous, or didn't go there for the previous 18 months. So this is going to be a very important meeting. I will be speaking, as will the event organiser, John Marga. John and his wife Val were in fact the first 2 people to be arrested in the Crawberry Hill campaign. I'm pleased to report, of course, that all charges were dropped and they will not be facing any further action. So if you're anywhere near the East Yorkshire area, then please come along to the United Church on the Tolgavel and Beverley on Wednesday week. And then straight after that, I hot-tail it down the motorway to East Sussex. Now, East Yorkshire is extremely rural, and East Sussex, although a lot closer to London, is also an extremely rural area. And the population density of East Yorkshire and East Sussex are not dissimilar. In fact, very few people are perhaps aware that East Sussex only has 17 miles of dual carriageway in the whole county. It just goes to show how rural it is. Well, 3 events in East Sussex. On the 11th of September, I'm in Uckfield. On the 12th in Heathfield, and on the 13th in Hailsham. And of course, the opposition to hydraulic fracturing in Sussex is gaining a tremendous foothold. Although the West Sussex County Council approved Quadrilla's application to return to Balcombe, choosing to ignore the 899 letters of objection, the local residents have now got permission to launch a judicial review. On the other side of the county, where Celtic made an application to start drilling at Whisper Green, the West Sussex County Council Planning Committee rejected that application, basically on a number of grounds, but not least one of the phenomenal impact that the increased traffic movements would have on the local roads there. So, at all these events, here's the issues we're going to be looking at. I obviously am hoping that we get a lot of people coming to these events who are pro-fracking, and or maybe those that are still sitting on the fence, because I can promise everybody that once we've had the opportunity to present the irrefutable evidence from the US, evidence that is increasing at a phenomenal rate of knots, and just shows the lies that have been pumped out by the British government, by individual politicians, and indeed by the industry. And remember, when I met with iGas last December, and I asked them whether or not they had investigated the magnitude of devastation that this industry had left behind it elsewhere in the world, the response was, Ian, that's not our responsibility. Sad, but true. So, we're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination. Obviously, in East Yorkshire, there is a very good possibility that Rathlin will be thwarted in their application for a further 2 years at Crawberry Hill. Sadly, there are those who think it's a done deal, because for those of you who saw the edition of Humanity versus Insanity earlier tonight, where I was talking about the command of Scottish Freemasonry and Scottish society, there's no question that there's a lot of funny handshakes in the UK. If it is a done deal, then it will be fought. Rathlin are not going to get a free ride, and they certainly should not be anticipating that this planning application is going to be rubber stamped. All across the country, the anti-fracking community is growing at a phenomenal rate. It's the fastest growing environmental community in this country. And the beauty of it is it's bringing people together from right across the social, the political, the philosophical, and the religious spectrum. People who previously would never have considered themselves to be activists in any way, shape, or form. And people are beginning to realize that, you know, those people who are committed and spending their time on the roadsides or in fields trying to protect against this abomination are not the usual suspects as presented by the mainstream media. And following the event that we had in Walkington, a village just outside Beverley, last Thursday, it was absolutely wonderful to see people come up to the camp who had previously, by their own admission, shied away from it because they'd been misled by the deceit that had been published in the local media. We're on a phenomenal challenge here, but the industry is on the back foot. We've got a long way to go. And if it's not property prices, if it's not the contamination of the soil, if it's not the contamination of the water, then it's the abstraction of the water. The evidence is there for all to see. Please share it. Please help us to share it. And once again, if you have the opportunity and the means, please consider supporting the Fracking Awareness Campaign by visiting www.frackingnightmare.com and going to the donation box on the left-hand side of the page. I apologise for it being a relatively short programme tonight, but at this rate, I will be getting back up to East Yorks by early in the morning, and I'm looking forward to meeting the people of North Newbold tomorrow evening. Thanks for joining us. Keep spreading the word. and see you next week.